My name is Bart, and some of you may know me from LinkedIn activity. I'm a huge Alteryx fan, and I spread this love mostly on LinkedIn. As a part of this, we have co-founded a company together with Emil, DataPal. We are official Alteryx partners, and basically we are helping people to start the journey with Alteryx. Emil, feel free to say a few words about yourself.
Thank you very much. I will actually share my screen because I have a short introduction about me and Mark. Mark is Alteryx legend, and Mark, if you could introduce yourself, and I will start the presentation.
Well, I'm Mark, Mark E. Crew. I've been using Alteryx since before it was Alteryx. I started using in 2005, and I've been active in community since 2014-ish, and I just enjoy sharing and learning, and that's what I'm doing here today. Is I'm here to learn and share.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us, Mark. This is a great privilege for us, and I'm really privileged to present this session with Marky Crew, who is like one of my idols in the area of the Alteryx because he knows the software really well and he shares his knowledge with others. He shares his energy, and yeah, big kudos for him. So, few words about me. I co-founded a company called DataPal with Bart, and because basically Alteryx was a game changer for my career. I was a heavy Excel user a couple of years ago, and my life was a pain. I needed to manual a lot, and I needed to cover a lot of manual reports, which were all based on Excel. And when I saw Alteryx, I saw a huge opportunity for myself. So I spent basically each of my evening learning the tool to upskill in this area, and now I'm here. Long story short. Because I spend a lot of time on the Alteryx community, sharing my knowledge with others, I was recognized as Alteryx ACE, and I'm super proud of that. And like I have mentioned before, I co-founded a company called DataPal, and we are helping people to use Alteryx more efficiently. But let's start our presentation. So we will talk about the best practices. We were covering this topic last time as well. So one of the most important things that you can do when you are working with Alteryx is to document your workflow properly. And you should do that for various reasons, not only for yourself, because couple from months from today, most likely you will need to reopen your workflow, change something, update something, or correct something, depending on the situation. And if you will spend like 10% of your time on documenting the workflow, then it will be much, much easier for you to understand. Here we have a really simple workflow that Mark created. At least I think Mark did it.
Yeah.
Your logo is here, so I believe that's the case, and it's a part of the crew package. And basically, if we will open this workflow, we see everything like very easily what is happening where. We can understand it, and it's a really simple one, but we have like a clear information here what will happen in case we will have 0 records here. Like this is a test workflow that is really simple to understand, and it's basically a macro, so you can reuse it very often on different scenarios. And yeah, Mark, would you like to add something about it?
Well, when you run this macro in your data, my concern, the reason why I prioritized and created the macro, is that if you're reading a file and no data comes into it, Alteryx does an error. Alteryx will let you read an empty file. If you're joining data together and nothing matches, it will not error. And so if you're expecting data and don't get data, there should be an error message. So in building this macro, I put in a ridiculous error message, absolutely ridiculous. And I wanted people to look at the error message itself. If you go into that text input file, you could go into that and put in a good error message for yourself. But I wanted you to open the macro, and I wanted you to look in there to just see how is this being accomplished. Maybe you don't even need the macro. Maybe you just need that message tool. And it's a way that you could get in there and look. The other piece is, as you can tell, I didn't spend a lot of time documenting the workflow. I didn't, I didn't put in color codes. I didn't put in big text in there. I just, here, this is very simple. It gets the point across. And just as an example of how less can be more. So if you do download the Expect Records tool and you want to change the error message, it's there for you to change. Don't worry about changing it, make it better.
And as a reminder, this session is like a discussion for each of us. So if you will have any questions, I'm not monitoring now the chat, but please feel free to ask questions and we will definitely answer them, or you can raise your voice and we can continue from there. The next slide is about expect the unexpected, and Mark will cover this.
Yeah, I'm lazy. So I put in a little bit more work up front so that I'm going to go to Aruba. So if you want to reach out to me, you better reach me soon because I'll be in Aruba for a little bit. When I go on the beach, when I go home at night, when I have my weekends, I want to be able to enjoy my life outside of work. So workflows that will run without me, that I don't need to see a workflow and check it. Anything that I can go and look at in the workflow that could potentially be unexpected, I try to think of, test for, and then when I build the workflow out, I try to put in tests to be able to make sure that everything is good at the end of the day. Because nothing takes away from credibility like users or customers finding errors in the workflow. So if you want to be able to be successful at not working, you need to put a little bit of effort into your workflows.
Yeah, I totally agree. The one thing that you really don't want to have in your work is the senior manager asking about the data that they are waiting for. For example, if you have a workflow that is scheduled and you don't have tests on the server to prevent loading incorrect data to the Tableau dashboard or some kind of database, sooner or later, some senior manager will ask you where is his data. And if you will prepare yourself, if you will, for example, stop the workflow and here you expect the data and you will stop it, or you prevent the data to be refreshed incorrectly, you could receive a message, an email, for example, from the Alteryx telling you that your workflow didn't complete it because there has been some errors along the way. And you can, the situation is totally different if you are saying to everyone, okay, sorry, we have some kind of issue, the data will not be ready on time, we need some time to investigate. You are in much better position than if the senior manager is asking you where is his data, because if you proactively share the information that the data isn't there, like your day will be much better and definitely less stressful. So it's a good idea to invest the time to prepare for the unexpected.
I have a quick question on
Sure.
this slide. How does the error message show up when people are looking at this and running it on gallery? So I really like the expect 0 records. On that, typically what I've done with these is I would send like an email with saying, oh, there's records, check to make sure that XYZ is in the lookup file, right, as in here. But if we're just airing out, is there a way to like modify the messaging that comes through that that macro to say, hey, it's airing out because of this?
That's
So,
interesting.
yeah, I will tell just shortly that there is an event ability, let's say, possibility in the workflow that you can, after run with errors, send an email to, I don't know, to you or your team.
It's not as dynamic as I like it to be, because typically we have like different users who could run the workflow in the gallery. So this is great when it's like a resource email, but it's not great when we have to update that every time somebody runs it, the events is. So I'm just wondering, when you run the flow with the expect zeros, what's the messaging that shows up on like the run log?
So, Mark, probably you know, because this is your tool.
Right, yes. So there are a couple of things in that. One, the message itself is a joke. So it will, it doesn't say this, but it's something to the effect of, like hell hath no fury like a input tool with no data. So
Okay.
it's gonna say something like that, and next to it, of course, would be tool ID 35.
Right.
If you modified tool 35 to being, I'm reading the current data, so it's the current data, then you would know when you're looking at the log, current data had no data. You could put in a better description like expect records return no data. And so you would be able to look at those two things together. Theoretically, what you could do is look at the approach to using this message tool, and you could simply put in the expression of what specifically you want it to be. Or you could modify the macro to allow you to put in a custom message for every implementation of the expect data, so that it would then feed in, oh, I've got a custom message in case you wanted it, otherwise it's a default. So, but it is out there on the Mavericks community gallery. I've given you a link to it, and take a look at it. And maybe you'll say, hey, Mark, here's a better implementation of it, and I'll update the macro to use somebody else's better implementation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for explaining, Mark. I think there are various ways, but and probably we need to tailor. It's best to tailor for your need. Like for me, information that there was an error message usually is sufficient that I need to reopen the workflow and look at it, what is happening. But sometimes maybe if the workflow is crashing more often, it is better to document it like in a more robust way, so it will be easier for you to understand what's the problem. I'm not sure how to hide it. Okay, now it's or not. Let me. Small technical issues. Can I hide that? Not really. Okay, now it works. So let's continue. Now we will focus on a couple of workflows, or maybe a couple of questions that we have seen on the Alteryx community. We would like to show that there are a couple of ways to solve specific problems, and some of them are faster, some of them are better, and we will discuss how you can tackle different problems. Allow me to read what's the problem here. So the question is about the transaction date column. Someone would like to fill that with the first day of the month. So basically, someone would like to transform 20th of December to 1st of December, and so on. It's a relatively easy task, but there are a couple of approaches to how you can tackle that. But before I will show them, I would also like to say that Mark really don't like the evil date time tool. And there are a couple of reasons behind it. The main reason is that it will slow down your learning curve in the area of the Alteryx. There are differences in syntax when we are using datetime tool and the formula tool. So if you will learn using datetime tool, some of the syntax will unfortunately not work for the formula tool. There are two articles that Mark written about this topic, and I will put them on the chat. Now, in case you would like to read it, we will also share the presentation later on, so you will have a chance to look into it deeper. Okay. But allow me to open the Alteryx and show you what we had in mind. I'm not sure if everyone is familiar, but in the Alteryx, there is a possibility to see how fast or how slow the certain tools are. If I will first turn that off, if I will run it, the workflow, it took around 2 seconds to accomplish without the performance profiling tool. Performance profiling tool will add here some additional information about the processing time, but at the same time, unfortunately, it will slow down a little bit of your workflow. So it's good to use it when you are trying to speed up your workflow, but probably on the production environment, you should turn this option off because this will slow down of your workflow. And what we basically done here is we have those couple of lines that we saw on the community, and we use the generate rows tools to increase the number of lines, because thanks to that, it's easier for us to understand how fast or how slow we are processing the data. And here we have the processing time of each of the tools. From left to right, datetime format, datetime trim, left. So this is the slowest approach. This is regex. Regex is very flexible. It will allow you to solve many different problems on your data journey, but unfortunately,
it's actually the datetime. That's the datetime format tool, actually.
Still, it's regex. Or not? It is.
No.
No, it isn't.
No, it isn't. Nope.
Okay.
It's just a way to do it. So it's if you do it this way with the datetime format function, which is the one I tell you should use instead of using, if you put in a datetime tool, it'll also show you how the Y, M, and D are different formats here. But if you go and put that in there,
I'm not very familiar with the tool, so No, it's
Yeah.
YYY PD.
Right.
Not really. Custom. YYY. This way it should work.
Yeah. See, it's confusing. You know how to do it.
Yeah, it's like
Okay, now
basically
take a look at the overall output, the white part of the canvas. So you can see look at the run statistics. That's the one. Okay.
it's faster than this.
It's faster than that, but it's still slower than, it's 2.5 times slower than using just the left function.
Yeah, we will go that way in a second. Yeah, the second option is to use the datetime trim tool, or function actually, and transform the data to the first of the month. But the fastest approach is just to use a very simple string function that you can put number of characters from the left side that you would like to see and just add the ending, so the ending is 0, 1 to get the specific result. But at the same time, when we are using this, we need to remember that sometimes our data might not be correct. So each time when we are like solving the problem, we also need to think about the quality of our data, just to ensure that we will not have 0, 1 as a position here. But we can tackle that differently. Any questions, or we can go forward?
Was the percentage on the profiling, is that just like the percent of time it took up for like the total workflow running?
Yes, so it's less than 8%.
Yeah, but if you take a look at the milliseconds, that's the absolute amount of time it took. So you're able to see if you're working with something that's taking a long time, hey, this tool isn't really the problem, it's the thing at the top of the list, because that's going to be the tool that took the most time. So if you're taking a look at your total performance of the workflow, then focus in on the things that are at the top of the list first before you start meddling into the other pieces.
I see, thank you. So when you have the profiling on, is it sorting the tools by the performance as opposed to just like the order they're happening?
True.
Interesting, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, like I said, it's really good to use it when we are working with the workflow and observing how fast certain tools are. So the second question is about transforming the data. We have here April, January, PIR, January, April, February, April, March. Someone would like to replace the month with, let's say, abbreviation of the month, a shorter version of it, and also replace double hyphen to single hyphen at the same time. And on this question of the community, there were like several different answers, and some of them are relatively complex, and some of them are much, much simpler. And if we are looking at like complex problems like that, if you would like to use the performance profiling tool to actually compare the speed, we should look only at the containers and see like processing time of the one container only, just to make your life a little bit easier. Yeah, regex is like only one tool, but it takes 4 seconds to process. And here it's like 1 second. Here we got also 1 second, I think. Or the second one.
And while the second or multiple seconds is interesting, you do have to run it. I generally run these things when I'm doing performance tuning 3 times, but I'm also looking at the tool milliseconds to see how long is it taking, because there's an overhead to running Alteryx, which could affect the runtime.
Yeah, I think what I would like to emphasize is Mark is all very often working with really big data sets. So if you have questions about making your workflow a little bit faster, Mark knows a lot about that topic. The fastest solution is about getting the specific word from there is a formula called get word from this column. So this would be a first word that we got here. Instead of replacing the data, the double hyphen or maybe double minus, we are just putting it here. And we also are using combination of the string formulas like left and get word to make the solution faster.
That looks like something I might have written.
Yeah, I know. I know. Yeah, and the next one, I really like the next one because I think it's quite common problem, and there is one approach that I was using 1 year ago actually, that is much slower than the one that Mark proposed and built into crew macro package. So basically the question is that someone would like to remove null columns from the data. You can also achieve that using data cleansing tool that is very robust, simpler to use, maybe from the user perspective. But this is a macro that if you will open it, it's like a huge tool that is really, really slow. And there is a reason why it's so slow. It's basically huge. But you can achieve that in much simpler way. Allow me to delete that. So one of the ways to achieve that, to solve that problem, is to use the combination of record ID, transpose tool, null tool, filter to unfilter the null values, and the crosstab tool. Thanks to that, we basically removed 2 million of data, 2 million of rows. Sorry, actually in this data set, we aren't removing everything. Or we are? Yeah, we are. No, we aren't. Okay, we are removing, one column, my mistake. And this is like a quite slow solution. This took 10 seconds. And the reason behind it is that transpose and crosstabs tool, they are amazing. They are allowing us to transform the data, to look at it from different angles. But those tools are also very, very slow if we are considering the processing power. And Mark proposed a solution which uses more tools, but is much faster than that. And maybe you would like to say a few words about it.
Yeah, instead of transposing all of the data, what I'm doing is I'm first going to read all of the columns of data. What are the headers called? So let's just say that it's A, B, C, D, and E. What I'm doing is I'm saying, oh, well, if A plus B plus C plus D plus E is null, if all of that stuff is null, then it's a null records. So what I'm doing is, instead of taking 1,000,000 rows of data and turning it into 1,000,000,000 rows of data, or 500 million rows of data, I'm going to go and I'm just going to write a formula that reads each record and checks to see, is it null in all of the field names? And if that's true, then Alteryx doesn't have to gyrate through the data. It just runs a formula against it. If you only had 2 fields, you'd just write a formula for it. So what I'm doing is dynamically figuring out what are all the field names, and I just build a formula that will then execute, and it will execute that one formula. Is everything empty? And it worked.
Yeah, it works really well, and it might look complicated, but at the same time, it's not when Mark is explaining that. And yeah, I think we need to take into consideration that this data set have only 3 columns. We have a lot of lines, but if the data set would be wider, we would have more columns than that. The difference in the processing speed would be even bigger. And yeah, so if you see that you need to remove some null columns from your data, but at the same time, it's very important for you, the processing power, I think this combination of tools will allow you to achieve your goal much faster.
And now think about it. Instead of just being able, you take the same pattern. What if I wanted to add the columns, everything to the right of this data, as far right as it goes? I want to go and add up the totals of all those columns. Now I want to summarize across the row, and it's dynamic. You never know how many columns of data there's going to be. You can use the same approach, and it will just keep adding in those extra columns of data instead of having to transpose the data, summarize. It's dynamic that way, that you could do that. Or worse, if you try to use the regular cleanse tool, say you've got the file name that sits at the end of the record, or you had a record ID at the beginning of the record, it's never going to be all null. You can't use the data cleanse tool. You're going to have to do something custom. So again, the technique about how to do that is the interesting thing to learn, and then figure out, how do I go about it?
Do you mind clicking through the tools in that container just to see the configuration a little bit better?
Sure. Unfortunately, I'm not able to make it bigger, but I hope. First of all, here we are counting non-null values. And basically, this is the most important step here, in my opinion, because we here just see where we got null positions in the data, and we are transposing the data to have the value in the column. We are identifying what positions.
Yeah.
So essentially, if the column has just nulls, it will filter it out with that filter tool. So you no longer have it. What happens after that? Sorry. You're renaming. Okay. And you're removing the count none null. Okay.
In the dynamic input tool, we are taking the field names from right input rows.
Okay. And okay, so was the goal of this to remove a column that has null values? Because I still see the test 2 in there.
Yeah, actually, yeah. It's called, we've called it in this demo, remove null rows, but it's actually columns. This one, as opposed to what I was describing, which was removing null rows. So my description didn't match this. This one is a faster way of finding the columns.
Okay, so this is removing null rows from data.
Right.
Okay. And this would work if it's like, if you have more than one, if you have several columns that you have to do the same on, it would just filter out any row that has a null value in any column, or is it just literally if row A has nulls, then it will filter them out?
Right, it'll get rid of the columns of data if it's entirely null.
Okay.
But the thing to learn inside of it, because PowerPoint, and let's go and put together the presentation. It's a little bit different when you're doing it live. All of a sudden, oh my gosh, what we were trying to show here is how to remove null columns like a pro. See, as opposed to where we were just talking about rows. Sometimes you just have to reimagine the data and say, I'm trying something different. I just want to see, how would I describe this to somebody else that I would do it without Alteryx? And then try to build that in Alteryx. So that's the way that I generally approach the problem, is I don't have Alteryx up. I think about what would I do, and then I use Alteryx to do what my mind did, as opposed to figuring out what tools do I need. I figure out how would I do it, you know, the little mouse inside, or squirrel, how would it do it without giving it the specific tools?
What's the performance difference on these?
Yeah, so I think one of them is basically finishing in 2 seconds, and the second one, it takes up to 10. But we also need to take into consideration that generate rows also is here.
Well, if you cache
it's much faster.
If you cache
I can cache it. Yeah, that's good point. That's good point. This also improves speed when you are developing the workflow. Like, I quite often forgot about that. But if you are working with one big data set and you will put it into memory, your life will be much easier. So here let me just rerun it once more. So here it's 10 seconds, 10.5 seconds, and here we got 2 seconds. So,
and admittedly, I do run with some really big data. And so I'm currently processing something in the range of 30 to 50 billion with a B records. And if I can save time, it's important that I do that.
yeah, definitely. For me, I think more often I'm working with a lot of different data sets, and what I almost always do, because very often I'm extracting the data from the databases, I'm just transforming the data and save it as a YXDB file, and later it is much easier for me to, to run data faster, because connecting the database, or quite often just loading the data, is one of the slowest points of the workflows, because that takes a lot of time. Taking into consideration that we have 18 minutes left, I will move forward a little bit. The next question is about, I will maybe read this because this is odd request. So this is, the question is about taking a column and basically having the text string have as many empty spaces as it does letters. So basically someone would like to replace the number of strings with empty spaces for each of the character. This is really odd request. And here we have on the community, we had two different solutions. One of them was related to using the regex, and the second one, which I think also Mark proposed, is about using the pad left function to like add extra space to the column based on the number of characters in the column itself. This is, I think, a request that will not show up very often, but yeah, it's good to know that there is first of all a function like pad left, and second of all that you can tackle a problem from a lot of different angles when you are working with the Alteryx.
And regex will always be, almost always, expect the non-regex to be a third of the speed or 3 times faster than the non-regex. So regex in this case took how long to run? 0.3.
Yeah.
Oh, 0.3 seconds versus 1 or more seconds. It's the regex is 0.37 milliseconds and pad left is 0.13. So my math on it is very close. It's 3 times 0.13 is about what you'll see the regex to be. And that's pretty consistent. Yes, Valentina, slower.
When Alteryx handle a file of size 80 gigs, I have to add a column name to the last column that lacks a name. I think if your PC will handle that, I don't see reason why it shouldn't. Regarding the recording and the slides, we will share them. No worries about that. And I think we have 1 or 2 nice tricks that you can use. Mark, if you could cover this one.
Yeah. Hey, I want to get rid of the columns of data. I get these people in Excel touch into an Excel cell, and all of a sudden you've got F3 showing up or stuff off to the right that's really not meant to be there. And and again, here's a weird one. Here I'm telling you to use a regular expression, but if the field name itself starts with the letter F, only has the letter F in it, and then it's got numbers after it, if it matches this pattern, you're really only doing it at the 1 row of data that's going through it. It will identify that the column is F and a number, and it will automatically deselect it because I have an exclamation mark that says, I don't want something that matches the pattern of a field name of F followed by 1 or many numbers. And then out of it, you've now dropped all those extra columns of data.
Yeah, I think this is actually quite common problem when you are working with the Excel files that are maintained by humans that are sometimes adding like an extra space or extra character or extra value inside of the Excel file, and later you are extracting a lot of unnecessary data that you basically don't need and you need to process it. So this is, I think, not very common approach, but a really good one to this problem.
And it's a lot faster than having to examine all the rows of data and seeing, are these columns all null?
It's not only faster, but it's also dynamic. So if the file will change, and in the next point you will have more unnecessary columns, you will need to, transform your workflow, change it a little bit. And here you have a dynamic approach that will always work unless someone will not name the column and they will put important data there. In that case, it will not work as expected, but still it's a really good solution in my opinion. The next one, I think this is quite well known, but still it's, in my opinion, worth sharing, especially if you are part of the bigger team. A lot of people are using like usual reference for the files, for the folders, and sometimes it might be really challenging to share the workflow across the team. And there is a really nice way of preventing that from happening. If you will go to options, advanced options, and workflow dependencies, actually this workflow is a really bad example, but let's change the workflow. This one will work better. If we'll go here to advanced options and workflow dependencies, here we very often will see paths like that. And here it isn't a problem because here we are referencing the folder that is a OneDrive and its data pal. But if that would be my employee ID instead of OneDrive, then if Bart or Mark would like to reopen the workflow, everything will stop working, and they would need to replace the folder names or the paths. Maybe they could actually the usernames. Maybe they could use something like find and replace and change echoes to their own abbreviation, to their own user ID. But it's just much simpler to go here, pick all relative, and if your colleagues from the team will open the workflow, there shouldn't be any problem with the processing, with accessing the data.
Emil, if you wouldn't mind, if you were to go and, because the questions are coming in about workflow constants. If you hit cancel there and then go to the workflow.
Mark, before you go there, can I ask a quick question about what Emil was showing? The clicking all relative, does that package the inputs together with the workflow if you're sharing it?
No,
or is it no? Okay.
It's just changed the way of accessing the folder. So basically, when
and
the workflow
that's
is
needed
saved
for the map drive, right?
The UNC is for the map drives.
Okay.
And the relative reference is just looking at the position where the workflow is saved. We can, let's say, go here. And instead of this workflow looking at the, for example, folder process flow, they will just look at the place where the workflow is saved, and then it would refer to the process workflow folder. It wouldn't look here. It would look for a folder and the place in the relative, let's say, way to the place where the workflow is saved.
I got it. Thank you. Thank you.
Happy to help.
So in the user constants, let's type in the word test for name and then give it a value there where you might have that data stored. And so let's just say it's in C:/test/ and that's where it's going to be. And then create another one for production. is yeah, it would be nice.
Not this time.
And theoretically, you could go on here. You could just put in there, you could create something called path, etc. So if you're creating constants here, if you were to go and put in production, it's got that already built in for you. So you could be saying, hey, if my workflow has set into it, there's a flag which we didn't create, which is production. If that is true, if production is true for a constant, it'll switch over to the production pathing. And if it isn't, it'll use the test pathing. So that number, but create another one. No,
Another one?
It's hard when we didn't practice this. So put in there just put in use, call it use.
Mm-hmm.
And then the value is P is in production, or you could put in production. You could write a formula that inside of that formula tool for your output path, if user.use equals production, then it's going to use the path of production, otherwise test. And it would switch between those values. And so all you're doing is you're saying, I'm running this in production or I'm running this in test, and it would use the right pathing for what's happening. So you could go and be creative with these constants, and now all of your pathing for all of your output tools dynamically gets updated to production or test. It's a concept. I'm just showing you that these constants, especially if you're in a large environment, saves you having to rework your workflows from test to production to wherever else you might be going. Maybe it's by department, that you could have your department ID as part of this global constant, and it puts it into the right folder structure.
Yeah, I am using something similar now, but basically when I'm running the workflow as an application on the server, I am using, let's say, test folders as an output. And this is also very convenient for the end users on the gallery, because I have a process where we got some configuration files, and the process is running on daily basis. The configuration files are maintained in Excel, so the end user in the business can use it. But if we would like to test something, I don't want them to, make the process provide incorrect values. So if they would like to test, they are testing by the application, so they don't need to come to me to perform the test. And at the same time, they have different output path, so no one will confuse the output from the test, from the test run with the actual output folder. Tristan, that was helpful, or?
Yes, that was helpful. Thank you. And it kind of makes me think of like the SDLC process. If you guys have the time, do you deal with that a lot in your organizations? And if you have maybe any tips about Alteryx and SDLC?
I would go, that's a great topic for Inspire and for a whole session. It's a great topic for training. But yes, Alteryx itself, there are a lot of, call it homegrown solutions that exist in regulated companies that are using Alteryx, that they've built in SDLC processes. I believe Alteryx has a focus on enterprise servers and are working towards making things more compliant for regulation like that. But
if Kristen, if you're interested, T-Mobile actually has a full-blown SOX compliant Alteryx gallery and SDLC process that we've built. If you want some more information, I can share that. Essentially, I did a presentation at Aspire exactly on this topic, so you can reach out afterwards.
Yeah, thanks, Valentina. That'd be great. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I would love to listen as well if I could jump in on that call, or
maybe Emil, we do another session and we talk about the CLC cycle or something like that to get more people. I have a presentation ready that I did at the conference, and it's been fairly useful for quite a bit of people. Just how we handle.
Please reach out to me and we'll have you scheduled for a September user group meeting virtual in Michigan, and everybody can be invited.
Awesome. Okay.
Sounds like a plan. Taking into consideration that we have 1 minute left only, any questions, or we will wrap up? Or maybe the key takeaways, we have 3 from this session, so maybe we will share them. Basically, if you want to learn something, teach it. This is a really great way of learning new things. I think by answering the questions on the official Alteryx community, or by visiting different user groups or delivering sessions, you can learn a lot. You also need to remember about testing, because if you have, especially if you have a server, if you don't have a server and you are just pressing run button by your hand and you see the output and you analyze the output each time, I think it's not super important. But along the way, when you become more, let's say, familiar with the Alteryx, you will know more about it. You will get better and better in making the tests. And the documentation is also really important if you are working in part of the team. I think, especially if you are a really ambitious person, I would recommend spending a lot of time on the documentation, because you don't want to be in the situation that you are the only person that can maintain a really important ETL process. You will receive plenty of phone calls, plenty of messages, and people will bother you on the vacation. And especially Mark, he likes visiting Aruba. He don't want to receive any calls from anyone during that time. So, if you will invest a time as on the two points here, your vacation will become uninterrupted by your boss or your colleagues from your job. Mark, you want to add something? You have your glasses.
I'm ready for my vacation. I'm ready.
Good.
So,
this was a great session. Thank you, guys. And sorry that I asked too many questions, but I found this very insightful. We've talked to Mark about this. I have a workflow that is super slow, so it gives me encouragement to look at it one more time and see if I can make it faster using the tools you guys presented. So thank you.
Happy to hear that. Tristan, you would like to add something, because I see your face. You should.
Just wanted to say thank you for the session, guys. Much appreciated. Interesting topics. Hope to see you at the next one.
Us. Yeah, so after the session, maybe not today, but in next days, you will receive recording and some additional materials that we covered today, so you can always revisit. Thank you for joining. It was a pleasure to have you. Thank you, Mark, for joining us today. And
thank you,
see
Mark.
you next time.
cheers.
Have a nice day.
Thanks all.
See you. Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you too.